So a couple of days ago, I made a post on my community posts on YouTube talking about the need to pay attention to three countries in particular in this World War III. And I listed Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and India. And in my theory, I said Turkey can be used to open a front against Russia, Saudi Arabia could be used against Iran, and India could be used against China. Now, I listed those three countries in particular because each of those countries has played both sides in this geopolitical game, should we call it. Turkey has applied to BRICS. President Erdogan has made numerous speeches, antagonistic speeches, speaking out against both against both Israel and the United States.
Ve yerleşimci şiddetinden derin endişe duyuyor. Bu vesileyle hayatını kaybeden Filistinli kardeşlerimize bir kez daha Allah'tan rahmet, Filistin devleti ve halkına başsağlığı diliyorum.
Yet turns around and sides with Israel and the United States to topple Iran's and Russia's ally, the Assad regime in Syria, that happened late last year. And it was a brilliantly executed operation because nobody saw it coming. It caught everyone by surprise, and it happened so quickly. We have Saudi Arabia, who has also applied to join BRICS, and they're an Arab country, and they have spoken out against Israel's genocide in Gaza.
Мы призываем также исламские и арабские страны выступить решительно против этой агрессии, против сектора Газа. Мы призываем к тому, чтобы было использовано все нормы международного права, связанные с решением гуманитарных вопросов, а также с двугосударственным урегулированием палестинской проблемы, созданием палестинского государства в границах 1967 года.
Yet, at the same time, they allowed the US to use their airspace to assist in shooting down Iranian missiles. And lastly, we have India, which will be the focal point of this very brief video I'm making. India is a foundational member of BRICS, and yet they have continuously resisted de-dollarization. And now it seems that they're gearing up to go to war with Pakistan, which is what I want to talk about. Now, if my theory is correct, then this whole debacle with Pakistan has the US's hands on it, in particular the Trump's administration. Now, Pakistan is an ally of China because one of China's major trading routes goes through Pakistan and all the way to the UAE. And as I understand it, by Pakistan allowing China to use their country as a trade route, it saves China billions of dollars because the alternative trading route is through the sea, which will take a lot longer time. So let me just look at this article briefly so you understand. This article here is from Arab News. I'm reading it from my computer. It was written on May 1st, 2025. Pakistan launches landmark trade route linking China to UAE via Kunjarab Pass. Consignment from China is expected to reach the UAE in 10 days as compared to 30 days via sea route. Traders welcome development, hoping the arrangement will turn Pakistan into a major hub of trade. Let me read this paragraph. At over 4,600 meters above sea level, the Kunjarab Pass connects Pakistan's Gilgit-Baltistan region with China's Xinjiang province, serving as a strategic gateway for trade between South Asia and Europe. This achievement signifies a major leap forward in the operationalization of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the CPEC, utilizing the shortest and most efficient route from China to the Gulf region via Pakistan, the NLC said in a statement. So, this new arrangement with China and Pakistan is saving a lot of time and a lot of money for China. So, it is beyond a mere coincidence, in my opinion, that this terrorist attack that occurred in India, in Kashmir, allegedly perpetrated by terrorists backed or funded from Pakistan occurred around this time. And of course, India and the President Modi is seemingly gearing up for some sort of special military operation in Pakistan. Now, this information is all relatively new, but thank God for social media and alternative media like mine and others. So at this point, I'll take the time to let you know if you wish to support my work. I appreciate all super thanks donations. Consider joining the channel membership. I'll put a link to a membership trade in the end screen. And consider buying some merch, alternative media, whips, logos on various clothing items in the spread shop. So back to the video. I have come across several videos and interviews, one in particular from a senior Indian general in the army who is unequivocally saying that this Kashmir terrorist attack is a false flag. In other words, he did not believe Pakistan had anything to do with it. And in fact, he is suggesting that it has been falsely perpetrated, perhaps by the Indian government, to facilitate these hostilities with Pakistan, much like what is now suspected happened on October 7th with the Hamas incursion into Israel.
Now, unfortunately, I cannot play the video with song, or else I'll be hit with a copyright strike because there's background music on it. So I'm going to play it without the sound, and I'm going to zoom in on the caption so you can read the words.
Now, if this is correct, if this is indeed a false flag, then it would make my theory far more plausible because, in my opinion, Trump's plan, Trump's focus of his administration is to weaken China. Trump is not really interested in Russia so much, or he does not appear to be, which is another point I will come to. He is focused on weakening China. One, with these tariffs. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy about these tariffs, of whether it will weaken China or whether it will weaken the US. It appears in the short term, both countries will take a hit. But if you slap these tariffs on China and start targeting their major trade routes, then I think it can do serious harm to China. And this is why I say India could be a Trojan horse for America and the West in their aim to weaken China. If India launches a special military operation into Pakistan based on a false flag, in my mind, the aim would be to disrupt that fairly newly built trade route that connects China to Europe and the Middle East. And it might be the beginning of World War III, which will not be a military war, because I have always said, and I've gleaned this insight from watching the Ukraine war, listening to a lot of military experts. They have done numerous war games in the Pentagon about a war between China and America over Taiwan. And in all of the war games, China wins. Because America, much like they had to do in Ukraine, will have to send billions of dollars in supplies and ammunition across the ocean to battle China on its doorstep via Taiwan. Similarly, what they try to do in Ukraine, where Russia and China are fighting on their doorsteps, the logistics lines are short, and the war is far cheaper for them, and they can outlast America. Same thing with Iran. Notice in that whole escalation between Israel and Iran last year, no Iranian soldiers died. None of them were sent to battle Israel. This war was an attrition war, Iran using its proxies, firing very cheap missiles, keeping the war contained economically and dragging it out. America has realized that that strategy of a proxy war is not going to work. I think the Trump administration has come up with a new plan, and it's going to be an economic war, and they're going to target China's trade routes, the Belt and Road Initiative, the Silk Road, etc., etc. I'll have to do some more research into those trade routes to fully understand how they operate. But that is what I think is happening with this India-Pakistan conflict. It is perhaps America using India as a proxy to target China and weaken its economy. So briefly, I also want to talk about the Russian-Ukraine war. And if my theory is correct, then I hope Mr. President Putin has his guard up, despite all the flattery and apparent good intentions that Trump seems to have for Russia, not imposing any tariffs on Russia. He's now spouting the Russian narrative about the war, which is the true narrative, but i.e. that Ukraine started this war in 2014. At first I thought, well, perhaps Trump was just trying to woo Russia away from China. Perhaps he was, but that's not going to happen. But the contingency plan could be he's trying to get President Putin off guard. And this is where Turkey comes in. Turkey is a major threat to Russia. One, it is a NATO country. Two, it has the largest NATO army in Europe, perhaps the most proficient army. And three, its geographic location. Turkey borders Georgia, which borders Russia. And we all know in 2008, the West tried to open up a front against Russia via Georgia, when the Georgian puppet leader, I believe his name is Saakashvili or something like that, the prime minister or president at the time, initiated an attack against the Russian-speaking regions in Georgia. And the Russian military had to come in and stop the fighting, defeat the Georgian army, sent a column to the capital. Tbilisi is the capital. It's South Ossetia and Abkhazia. So after pushing the Georgian army out of the Russian-speaking regions, they sent a column to the capital in Tbilisi and got the Georgian PM to stand down from his aggravating attacks. This all lasted a mere 5 days. The West did not come to Georgia's aid. But now that Putin is focused on Ukraine, and all this peace talk is going around in the air, and it all seems that Zelensky has given this ultimatum by Trump that either you enter into negotiations and a ceasefire, or we are going to abandon you. All of this perhaps could be a ruse by the Trump administration to try and get Russia off guard or to slow down their offensive. And when they are not looking, the most logical strike from NATO on Russia would be via Turkey through Georgia, penetrating into Russia. Now, throughout this war, there's been a lot of deception, a lot of diversion, both in the information space and militarily. And what I have learned is that whatever they are hyping up on the news, usually you should look elsewhere for what is going on. So throughout this war, there's been much fanfare about Finland joining NATO and the Baltic nations, and their leaders have been doing a lot of posturing and bravado and threats to Russia. All that, in my opinion, is distraction, which tells me if NATO was to open up another front on Russia, it's not going to come from Finland or Estonia or Lithuania, all those other fronts that are in the news. It's probably going to come from the quiet front, but the most likely one, which is the border with Georgia. It would not take much for Turkey to position maybe 100,000 troops in Georgia and to launch an offensive, perhaps towards Crimea, and open up another front against Russia. Now, of course, you would think that if that were to happen, Russia would be able to see this buildup of troops and so on. But perhaps if they are distracted, if their surveillance is focused on Ukraine, if Zelensky decides to do another rash attack, and Putin is distracted by these peace negotiations, I mean, all this is speculation. But the point is, I think my theory is starting to show signs of merit, because I think this India imminent attack on Pakistan is a proxy war for America to weaken China. And I don't think America is going to give up on Ukraine, or let's say not Ukraine. They will give up on Ukraine, but they're not going to give up on their plan to weaken Russia. Ukraine might be stage one. When Ukraine is finished, which likely will happen sooner than later, another front may occur. And this is why I think Putin has been so careful, quite wisely, not to overcommit to Ukraine. He came in with a small force. His standing army pre-2022 invasion is 950,000 active troops and another 1.5 or 2 million reserves. He comes in with 190,000 troops. He does a partial mobilization in 2022 from his reserves, not his active army. And then he continues to fill his army with new recruits of volunteers, i.e., civilians who were not part of Russia's original army, but who volunteered and were paid handsomely and have been training in and around the SMA zone and slowly brought into combat. In other words, most of his standing army pre-2022 has not been involved in Ukraine. They are still intact, defending the border. And I hope he has placed a lot of them on that Georgia border to provide the necessary reconnaissance and surveillance and alert them if any such provocation is or might occur sometime soon. And I think the West, that's why the West has been so focused, both in their media and through Ukraine, to provoke Russia. They are desperately trying to provoke Russia to do something rash in Ukraine, perhaps launch a large-scale offensive to wrap up Ukraine, but which would cause a lot of casualties. They are desperately trying to provoke Putin to do something that would weaken his army, so that if another front is opened up, it will be more likely to be successful. That to me is part of the reason why they've continuously had all these US generals and legacy media writing preposterous articles how the Russians can't fight and how they're taking so long to take all of Ukraine. It's an attempt to try and embarrass Putin, to play on the supposed inferiority complex that they believe the Russians have, and that Putin and his men would say, let us show them that we can fight. We are going to wrap up Ukraine, bringing 1 million men and show them what the Russians can do, which would be a grave mistake politically, but most importantly, militarily, and in the defense of Russia in this new world war against NATO. So my point is, do not underestimate President Trump's plan with these tariffs. I think that is stage one in a large plan to weaken China, to target China's trade routes, impose heavy tariffs on them, and seriously hamper the economy, even at the risk of short-term detriment to the US economy. I think he's playing the long game. Trump has 4 years in power. We are not fully finished with year one. And I think out of all the presidents, he has done the most, let's say, the most controversial actions within the first few months of his presidency. He, I think, is playing a long game. And we will yet see how it unfolds. But keep your eye on India, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia in this geopolitical game for world dominance.